Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me here. So I'm going to talk about coinage in Russia and to talk about some other means of payment like paper money and platinum coins. But basically, I would love to focus on copper coins, silver coins, and a little bit on gold coins. And to begin with, I would like to start with the first slide, which is showing you actually the mints that were operating during the 19th century. And I'm not taking local mints like Tiflis in Georgia or in Latvia. I'm not taking them. I'm taking only those that were operating for the European part of Russia and for Siberia. So during the reign of Alexander I, 4 of them were operating in St. Petersburg. And you see that St. Petersburg was producing pretty much all types of coins, gold, silver, and copper coins. Yekaterinburg, which was situated near the Urals, producing copper coins. Suzun, also producing copper coins and situated in the eastern part of Siberia. And Izhor was actually situated near St. Petersburg. And during the reign of Nicholas I, all 4 were also in action. But as you can see, St. Petersburg was also producing platinum coins for some certain period of time. Then, during the reign of Alexander II, only 2 were left. And finally, during the Alexander III reign, only 1 was left. So just a few words about these mints. Basically, I wanted to draw your attention to the Izhor one, which was used as an additional type of mint and was used during the times of monetary reformation. Basically, in 1810, it was the first attempt to set up the silver standard and fix the weight of copper coins. So the capacity of the existing mints, by the opinion of Alexander I, was not enough. So they decided to use Izhor for reminting the copper coins, changing the weight of them. And later on, the second time Izhor was used, it's the final and successful attempt to set up silver standard in 1839, but it was used from 1840 for the same reason, to remint the copper coins, to change the weights. All the rest were actually regular used mints. And let's take a look closer at the production of copper coins, because as you can see, all 4 types of mints were producing copper coins. Let's take a look at the share. So as you can see, most of the share is taken by Yekaterinburg mint, which was situated in the Urals, while all the rest are incompatibly small. And please take a look at the copper produced by Suzun, because later on we will look at the map where these coins were distributed, but generally they were produced for Siberia. While copper coins produced by Yekaterinburg, St. Petersburg, and Izhor were produced mainly for the European part of Russia. And now let's take a look at the map. It is an old one. All right, so you see the 3 areas, right? So the one on the right is the Suzun, which is producing 200,000 rubles per year. And the one in the middle is the Yekaterinburg, which is producing from 2 to 5 million rubles per year. On average, it's like 2 million rubles per year. And the last one is Izhor, and St. Petersburg is also there, but St. Petersburg there, and a little bit to the south is Izhor, so it's almost the same point. And we do have a description of how the coins were actually distributed. By description, in the note of the director of the Department of Mining and Salt Affairs of 1818 on the supply of copper coins, we know that the copper coins minted in Yekaterinburg were going to be supplied in Permskaya, Vyatskaya, Orenburskaya, and part of Tobolskaya provinces, which means the left side, the European part of Russia, and a little bit of the western part of Siberia. And from these provinces, the coins can be moved by Chusovaya, Kama, Volga till the Caspian Sea. Might you notice the the blue lines going down, and by Don till Azov Sea, by Oka till Kolomna. So we can leave the coins not only by the cities and provinces, but also by small villages where there are internal trade turnover. Then Suzun will supply Tomskaya, Irkutsk, and part of Tobolskaya provinces. It is easier to supply money there as the peasants from other parts of provinces are working on the manufactory, are receiving this coin for their work. Izhor will supply St. Petersburg, Olonetsk, and other northern provinces. What he says is actually that Suzun is supplying the whole Siberia, which is from the Urals and all the rest. And these two guys, they are supplying the European part of Russia, which is, to my mind, is incompatibly different. So now let's take a look at the graph. So, as I have said, annual production of Yekaterinburg was around 5 million rubles, while Suzun was producing only 200,000 rubles. And this money was aimed at distribution around Siberia. How do we know that the amount of this money was sufficient for Siberia? In fact, it was not. We do know that it was insufficient because we know that in Siberia there were lots of deals made by barter, by credit, and by other means of payment like using commodity money. But most importantly, we also know the exchange rates in Irkutsk, and this information was I have received this information just recently from the archives of Irkutsk, and we found out that there were reports about the circulation of copper, silver, and gold in Irkutsk, and the officials that were writing these reports to the officials in St. Petersburg and Moscow were saying that there is no gold and no silver circulating during daily trade in Irkutsk, and Irkutsk is considered as a huge trade city in Siberia, while there is copper. And we do know some information about exchange rate between copper coins and assignation, so banknotes, paper money, right? And it is really interesting that the exchange rates of high nominal assignation note was 8 copper kopeek against 1 ruble. 8 copper kopeek is 0.08 ruble, right? And for low nominal notes, 3 copper kopeek against 1 ruble. So basically we know that there was copper, and we also know that there were lots of assignations, and they were of low value for the Siberia because the exchange rate was enormously low. And thus the copper was quite in demand, which does constitute the general information about Siberia, that they needed copper and they were using barter in sometimes. So, and this diagram doesn't say how much money was in circulation, unfortunately, because this is the daily yearly production of copper, and it doesn't include the fact that some of the coins were taken out from the circulation and they were reminted and the weights were changed. So it's just the production, and the real circulation might be even less than that. In fact, by approximate calculation, the real circulation of copper coins could have been something like 50% of what have been produced. Now let's take a look at the weights of copper coins, which I was talking about. So as you can see, the weights were changing gradually. So out of 16 kilos of copper, you could make different amounts of rubles in copper. And it does make sense when they were making 16 rubles out of 16 kilos of copper, in the way that consider general fact that before we used assignations, they were using this type of weight, and 16 kilos of copper costed like 16 silver rubles, right? So in order for the silver ruble be almost the same as copper ruble, you need to produce 16 copper rubles out of 16 kilos of copper costing 16 silver rubles. The situation does change when the assignations were used, because then you have the price of the copper calculated not only in silver but also in assignation ruble. And Originally, assignation ruble was considered almost the same, was supposed to be the same as 1 silver ruble. But basically, when the backing of paper money was cancelled, the copper backing of paper money was cancelled, this equality, it broke. And what we see that in 1810, the price of 16 kilo of copper in assignations could have been around 24. This is why they decided to increase the amount of rubles produced out of this amount of copper. But in silver rubles, it was like eight silver rubles. So what we see here is that the equality breaks down, equality between assignation ruble and silver ruble, but most importantly between copper ruble and silver ruble, which is kind of sad. So, and then the same goes further because the price of copper in assignations goes up. In 1831, it was like 33 rubles in assignation rubles, while they were producing 24 rubles out of 16 kilos of copper, so they increased the weight again, and this is how it works. And now, let's take a look at the amounts of produced copper coins by nominals. As you can see, the highest nominal is 10 copenhag, which is 0.1 ruble. It's even less than 1 ruble, right? And it is interesting how actually the combination of nominals evolved, even though I would love to be careful about the explanation of the combination of nominals, because the choice for nominals was made by the Ministry of Finance, and thus it is their approximation of what the demand for coins is, which might be not the reality, right? So, but it is very interesting that during the Napoleon War, we see the huge amount of the very, very, very low copper coin produced, and the highest nominal is 0.02 ruble, which means probably, well, at first I thought that somehow the trade, internal trade should have been boosted because the war was on the territory of Russia, and probably soldiers needed some food, and they were buying something from peasants, and besides, some of the part of the of the army was made out of peasants, so they probably were paid in copper. But then I also thought that maybe it's not only for the trade turnover, but for the fact that some of the provinces in Russia were completely burned and destroyed, like huge territories were destroyed by Napoleon. And I thought that when money is circulating around some territory, even like European part of Russia, it is circulating uniformly without any interruptions. And thus, when something happens and the circulation is interrupted by destruction of some provinces that were giving you products, that were exchanging with you, you need to compensate somehow. So you need to produce even more money to compensate for this interruption of the circulation. That is just my guessing. I can't be sure about that. But I would love also to draw your attention to the second half of the 19th century, where you see 1851, and then it goes further to the right, and you see a really, really nice increase of production of copper coins during 1861, which is, by coincidence, is the date of the cancellation of slavery in Russia. So, to my mind, it is kind of natural that during this period just before, like preparation period and in the ongoing process, there should have been produced more copper coins in very different nominals because peasants were released. So there should have been an increase in trade, in really low deal trade. And let's also take a look at the silver. As you can see, silver has higher nominal, and the lowest one is 0.05 ruble, 5 kopeek, right? But generally, you see that during most of the time, 1 ruble was produced. It constituted the highest share of the production. And again, I would like to pay attention at the year 1861, where you see a huge amount of low nominal silver coins produced, which by coincidence can be it can be explained by the release of slavery again. And here, I think it is quite natural that the amount of silver rubles is huger than the amount of copper coins, because already in 1839 we have set up silver standards, so they should have been in the process of transferring from the usage of copper coins to the usage and domination of silver coins. And, well, I also want to be very careful about explaining the peaks here, because speaking generally, silver coins were used for big transactions, for paying tariffs, import and export tariffs. 1 ruble was even called the bank coin or trade coin. But by trade coin, I mean the trade, interregional trade, and used to pay tariffs, export, import. By bank coin, I mean that most of the debts that Russia received from abroad were calculated in this coin, in silver bank coin. So silver was also used to repay back the debts, and silver was also used to constitute part of the military capital. And I do have some information. For example, concerning the expenses for the army. For example, during 1812, Barclay de Tolly needed to be financed by silver and gold up to 14.5 million silver rubles, and it is the description of that time. And for example, in 1827, war with Persia costed 600,000 in gold rubles, 700,000 in silver rubles, and 9 million in assignations. And here is the thing, actually. I'm not including here the information about assignations, which here we see that silver is produced in the amounts no more, actually, than 20 million, right? While assignations were in hundreds of millions of rubles. So I'm not including that on purpose. I would love to focus more on the coins here. So I could have explained these peaks by wars, because obviously you make money, you make silver coins for supporting your expenses for wars, or for paying tariffs when the tariffs were changed or trade balance was changed. But generally speaking, I would prefer another explanation and say that it just shows the pattern of expenses of Russia and their taste for coverage, the deficit of their balance of payments, internal balance of payments. So it is quite normal that they mint a lot of coins during the period of high expenses during the wars, even though, as you see, the amounts are pretty low in comparison to assignations that were in hundreds and millions. So they just show the pattern that they needed to cover the expenses. And for God's sake, I'm sure that most of the coins were printed to cover the revenues, to constitute the revenues of our Tsar. And so, I mean, the revenues of for the country. So basically, the final, I want this one. The final one is the proportion of copper, silver, and gold produced, and a little bit of platinum, actually, but it was like really, really tiny amount. So you almost don't see it, like 1830, 39, 1840. And this is basically it. And yeah, I haven't talked about gold, but basically gold was not very popular around inside the territory of Russia, and was also used to repay debts and also to sponsor the military movements outside the country. So it's almost the same as the silver. Thank you very much.